Many years ago, I stumbled across an episode of Dr. Oz where he was talking about prayer, and he had assembled a panel of guests, of experts, to talk about the relationship between prayer and health. And they were extolling how people who pray experience a much greater sense of well-being, that there are very positive, significant positive effects both on physical health, physical well-being, and emotional, psychological well-being as a result of prayer. During that episode, they talked about all kinds of things, like whether there actually are answers to prayer, like whether there's a God out there who does actually answer prayer in terms of healing people. They also talked just about how the person who prays, whether there's a God or not, that elicits a greater sense of well-being in them. It gives them a better health outcome as a result of them praying. But another thing they touched on was the role of gratitude in prayer and how that affects our well-being, our actual physical health and emotional health. And across the board, if you have an attitude of gratitude spiritually towards God, there are significant benefits, significant health benefits, both physical and psychological, that the research has borne out. Dr. Oz during that show is at pains to emphasize that it doesn't matter what you believe about God, what religious tradition you follow, whether you tend to believe God is more of an energy, kind of in a generic understanding, an esoteric understanding of God, or whether you believe in a more personal understanding, more concrete, relational idea, a conceptual concept of God, doesn't really matter. But one of the doctors on his panel, the panel that he had assembled, Dr. Koenig from Duke University, kept interrupting Dr. Oz, much to Dr. Oz's chagrin, and kept insisting that that's not what the research shows. While the research does show, according to Dr. Koenig, that it doesn't matter which religious tradition you follow in terms of experiencing some kind of benefit, you will experience some significant benefits. Those who believed in a personal God experienced significantly more benefit than those who didn't. Those who gave thanks to a God that they understood or conceived of as personal experienced greater benefits, health benefits, a sense of well-being than those who simply believed in a more esoteric, generic concept of God. The subsequent research has borne all of this out. Research into gratitude, there's a wealth of it now since that show aired many years ago. And what it keeps showing is that while an attitude of gratitude is a real good thing, it enhances our sense of well-being, it has profound, significant impacts on our physical health and emotional, psychological health. While all that's true, that when we express that gratitude to another person, just interpersonally, that it increases our sense of well-being. So it's good to have an attitude of gratitude just generally, like to be thankful for things in your life, to go through a list or litany in your head of those things. But it's much more impactful when you actually express gratitude to another person. And the same is true spiritually, that if we just have an attitude of gratitude towards a generic kind of a God, if we conceive of God as some kind of energy or force in the universe or the universe itself, that's good, but it's far better if we understand God in personal terms, that we express our gratitude to a personal God. One of the most profound sermons I ever heard, profound insights I've ever heard, came during a sermon that a pastor I worked with a number of years ago gave during a Thanksgiving service. It was the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. And during his sermon about Thanksgiving, he talked about how Thanksgiving, giving thanks, gratitude, an attitude of gratitude is simply the flip side, the reverse side of grace, of experiencing the grace of God. So if you think about it, when somebody does something gracious toward us, when we experience grace, especially when that grace is given in an extravagant way, a way that we can't return, that we can't reciprocate, the only response that we can give, the natural response, the thing that wells up inside of us, is gratitude, is to give thanks for what that person has done for us, to express it to them, oftentimes profusely, especially if their gift has been lavish, then we want to express our thanks profusely. And what this pastor said is that the way we are made as human beings, designed as human beings by God, a God of grace, is to respond that way to his grace. So even if you don't have anything, was his challenge during that sermon, even if you don't have anything to be thankful for. The circumstances of your life aren't that great. Things aren't working out in your life the way that you wanted them. But if you just stop and give thanks to him anyway, that it will open your heart to the floodgates of his grace. When he said that, all kinds of bells were going off in my head because I had experienced that. In fact, one of the lowest points in my life many years before that, I experienced that very same thing of giving thanks in a moment where I had nothing to be thankful for, a moment of real, true, utter despair, but just started thanking God for anything I could, like for the air that you breathe, for the gift of music, for trees, and experiencing this overwhelming sense of joy, of peace, of well-being. It clicked in that moment what was happening, why that experience happened, why it was so powerful. And since I heard that sermon, and since that, more importantly, that experience I had many, many years ago, I've continued to experience that in moments in my life where things really sucked, where I didn't have anything to be thankful for. I couldn't point to anything, any circumstance that was going really well that I could be thankful for. Just giving thanks to God anyway, for whatever I could, for the simple things of life, for the gift of life itself, or just praising God for who he is, giving thanks for the God that I believe in, that I believe is real, a God who would give everything for us in Jesus, his very life for us. Just giving thanks for those things unleashed the floodgates of his grace, unleashed this overwhelming, overpowering sense of well-being. This bizarre quirk in us of being able to give thanks and experience a greater well-being even when we really don't have anything to be thankful for, even in moments when there is nothing to point to in our circumstances that we should be thankful for. This bizarre quirk in us is remarkable if you think about it, because if you just go by like a materialistic understanding of the world, the universe, a kind of an evolutionary Darwinian understanding of the world, natural selection would predict the exact opposite. In moments when our circumstances were horrible, when they were threatening in some way to us, whether physically or psychologically, our response should be to take action, to change them, not to kind of sit back contemplatively and give thanks. Giving thanks should produce the opposite reaction in those circumstances because we're under a real threat. We have to do something to change circumstances, to shake them up. We should feel more miserable in those moments. But the reality is, what the research bears out, is that when we have the attitude of gratitude, despite our circumstances, regardless of what they are, good or bad, we experience this profound sense of well-being. It affects both our physical health, our material physical bodies, as well as our psychological and emotional health. And nothing in natural selection, in a materialistic, naturalistic understanding of the universe would predict that. Why is this bizarre quirk in us if it's not by design? How could it be if there is not a God out there who put it in us, a God of grace, who wants to unleash his grace in us regardless of circumstances, who promises to give us his grace no matter what, in any moment of our lives, whether things are going well or not? The only real way to explain this bizarre quirk in our makeup, our ontology, how we are as beings, as human beings, is that it's put in us by design, by the design of a gracious God, the God that is uniquely revealed in Jesus Christ. So as this is Thanksgiving week, Thanksgiving Day is coming up this Thursday, I encourage you to try this for yourself. You may be completely skeptical. The circumstances in your life may totally suck at this moment. They may be rotten. You may be full of despair and desperation. You may be incredibly skeptical, not only of what I'm telling you about the reality of the attitude of gratitude, but also skeptical about there being a God out there in the first place. But I would encourage you this Thanksgiving to just give it a try. Try it for yourself. See if it works. Even if you have nothing to be thankful for, give thanks to God and see what happens. Even if you don't believe he's out there, even if you have to start by praying and saying, God, I don't even know if you're real right now. I don't know if I'm just talking to the air and wasting my time or not, but I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to give you a chance. Even if that's how you have to pray, just envision God as he's revealed in Jesus, a God who loves you so much that he would give his life for you, that has lavished that most gracious of all gifts upon you. Think of God that way, and then just start thanking him. And if you can't thank him for anything, like even the air or the trees or anything like that, then thank him for who he is, for what he has done. Even again, if you don't believe it, if you're skeptical about it, just try to imagine it's all true and to give him thanksgiving from your heart and see what happens. And I would encourage you to perhaps take it one step further. I know this is going to be hard for some people, for some of you, but I would encourage you to go one step further and beyond just praying, by yourself on your own to God in this way, in this attitude of gratitude. I would encourage you to participate in a service of thanksgiving, to go and actually worship God in a community of faith. Worshiping God just takes Thanksgiving and kind of puts it on steroids, because instead of simply thanking God for the things that he's done in your life, the things that you are grateful for, and again, you may not have anything to be grateful for, it's about praising him. Worship is a loaded term, but it's simply about adoring him for who he is. When we fall in love with somebody, we want to adore them. We want to express that. In fact, expressing how beautiful we find them. Like when you first fall in love and you sit there and you stare into your lover's eyes, and you have to kind of extol all the beautiful things about them physically, beautiful things about their personality, all the things that you find so wonderful about them. That experience of expressing it, the inability to contain it and hold it in, but have to express it, that experience of expressing it actually deepens your experience of love, of joy, of bliss that you find in that relationship and that love. The same is true with God. The more that we adore him in worship, the more that we praise him for who he is, not simply what he's done, but for who he is, that deepens our sense of joy. That opens the floodgates even wider for him to pour out his grace in our lives. My personal experience with worship started off really bad. As a kid, I had to go to church because my mother made me. I did not want to be there. And even though Catholic masses at the time were only 40 minutes long, they weren't that long compared to a lot of worship services, it was the most mind-numbingly boring thing I experienced as a kid and teenager and even into early college. I hated going to church. But more recently, in the past several decades, worship has become like being on the edge of heaven. That's the best way I can describe it, like being on the edge of heaven. Things have stirred in me during worship, worship stirs in me things that I have not ever experienced anywhere else. It stirs a passion, a depth, and an intensity that's indescribable. That's a joy that is unspeakable. And that's all because of simply adoring God, of praising God for who he is. The way we are made, our makeup, this bizarre quirk in us, where this attitude of gratitude can defy circumstances and give us an actual, real, research-based, substantiated, a real, true sense of well-being, a better physical health, a better, truer emotional and psychological health. That reality, that quirk, that natural selection doesn't predict, that evolutionary theory doesn't predict, this bizarre quirk in us that really can't be explained. How else would you explain it other than a God of grace putting it in us by design? It can't be explained any other way. That reality is only put on steroids when we adore God, when we worship God, a God who we wouldn't predict this to be part of our DNA unless he was actually out there, who we wouldn't predict that in the act of worship, of adoring him, we would actually deepen our sense of well-being, deepen our joy, deepen our passion, our bliss, our ecstasy. But all those things happen because he is real and he really loves us in the most gracious way possible, giving everything, his very life, to us. So I pray that this Thanksgiving you have a wonderful, amazing day, amazing experience. I pray that you have many things to be thankful for, that all the circumstances in your life are ordered the way that you want them to be, that your life is full of good things and good, loving people. But above all, even if none of that is true, even if it's the exact opposite, I pray that you will have this experience of his grace stirring in your soul, an experience that you have ready access to simply by giving him thanks, giving him praise. I pray that you will try that and experience that for yourself. Happy Thanksgiving.